So welcome back, everyone. I think we're going to get started with our second panel. So we're now moving from the immediately local Philadelphia scene to the more expansive national scene of women in science. So I'm pleased to introduce our second panel, which is on opportunities for engagement, teaching, and learning. So if you're on this session and you're not already floating in the immediate proximity, please make your way to the front of the room. But leading us in our second session is Alexis Pedrick, who is the Director of Digital Engagement at the Science History Institute. She oversees the award-winning Distillations digital content platform, which includes building out a strategic vision for the magazine, podcasts, and social media storytelling that's all organized by the Science History Institute. She is also the co-host of the Distillations podcast. And if you haven't listened to it, it's really beautifully crafted. I know you did a fantastic... During COVID, Alexis and her team did a really wonderful talk back with our long-term fellows, and I learned so much about the work that goes into building podcasts in a way that's not only scientifically accurate, but actually entertaining and accessible for many audiences. So I'm pleased to have her here. Alexis is also the director of Innate, How Science Invented the Myth of Race, which is a National Endowment for the Humanities-funded podcast and magazine project that explores the historical roots and persistent legacies of racism in American science and medicine. So I will welcome Alexis to the stage, and then all the others on panel two. If you can make your way to the front, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
My goodness, thank you. I am so excited. I have been reading all the papers and lightly Google stalking, casually Google stalking all of you. So I'm so excited to talk with you all and hear more. So we are gonna just get started. First up, the first paper we have is CybHER, Empowering K-12 Students for STEM Careers Through Engagement and Pipeline Creation. And I'm really excited because talking to us more about that is gonna be Dr. Ashley Podhradsky. She's the Vice President for Research and Economic Development at Dakota State University. She's also a member of the First Bank and Trust Board of Directors. She's a sought-after speaker and keynote for cybersecurity events around the country. So actually, we're super lucky and really excited to have her. Her team's received tons of grants from the National Security Agency, National Science Foundation, Small Business Administration, and others. But super relevant to us, she is the co-founder of CybHER, which is an outreach program that's, as we said, reached thousands of people from K-12, college age and beyond, and honestly, just thrilled to talk about it and hear more. So I'll let you take over.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I'm Ashley, and I'm here to talk about CybHER and the approach that we have for engaging middle school youth through high school in cybersecurity education and outreach. And to bridge the gap, I used to be a faculty member at Drexel, and so it's great to be back in the city and to be here presenting with all of you about the different types of work and research that we're working on. CybHER, we have the mission of empowering, motivating, educating, and changing the perception of girls and women in cybersecurity. Back in 2013, when we started this program, we had lots of different grants and activities to help engage kids. AAUW had a grant to go into the classrooms. The National Science Foundation had some capacity building activities. And the National Security Agency had funds for camps. And we felt that we had all these separate initiatives, and we wanted to bring it together in a year-round program. And that's when we created CybHER. And with CybHER, we've impacted more than 45,000 kids over the last 10 years. And I say kids because when we do go into classrooms, when we host our own events, often there are little boys there, and we want to help them understand, and they need to see girls are competent and capable of participating in cybersecurity. So over the last 10 years, we've also raised about $2 million in grants and gifts, and all of our resources go directly into hiring our students through a near-peer mentoring model, providing scholarships for our students' professional development, and the equipment and resources that we need. And so we're very proud of the activities that we've had with CybHER. Since we started, we've had 2 guiding philosophies that we have not deviated in 10 years. The first is we don't talk about the problem. So when you go into a classroom of middle school girls, and they're already wanting to figure out who they are, not be the weird kid, and when they learn that only 20% of cybersecurity professionals are women, they think, well, that's another thing that makes me different. And so instead, through near-peer mentoring, we have college students that are hired that are performing the hands-on activities that we're doing in the classroom. And so that they can see those girls. If she can see it, she can be it. And so they can see the girls that are performing those activities and think, hey, I could be like her. And then from a more aspirational aspect, we have our national level conversations, our CybHER conversations. They're on our YouTube channel where our students are interviewing leading women in cybersecurity. And the second thing that we haven't deviated from is our hands-on activities. So everything we do in one aspect or another is completely hands-on. So for example, we've all had to go through phishing assessments at work and talk about secure passwords. And that is often one of those check the accreditation box. We don't like to do it. It's a little boring. And so we change it, knowing that account credentials are, the cornerstone of cybersecurity, and that being able to ensure that users are who they say they are is important as well. And so what we do is we actually show the girls how to crack a password. So the girls get to learn how to crack the word password, and they see that it takes a fraction of a millisecond to do that. Then we ask them to make it stronger, and we don't define stronger. And so from then, we show them how to hash it, then they crack it again, and it takes longer to crack. And so iteration by iteration, these middle school girls learn how to crack and create passwords that, or not crack them, but create passwords that will take about 300 years with current computing power to crack. And so now these girls have figured out what a secure password is and how to create one. Now, we don't send them home with the tools. We leave mom and dad and brothers and sisters passwords safe. But they can be the ones to share that information. They can be the ones to say, okay, so when I need to create this password, it needs to be secure, and here's how it's secure. And so then we ask the girls, what characteristics, well, just take a step back. We ask the girls, what do you use passwords for? Number 1 is always Instagram. Instagram. Number 2, you got to keep mom out of my phone. And number 3, to turn in assignments at school, in that order. And so then we ask them, why do you care? Well, I don't want anyone to hack my Instagram. I don't want my brother to see my text messages. I need to be able to turn in school assignments. And so with that twist, with that pivot in approach, we've now taught girls a fundamental concept of cybersecurity, which is password management. And they know what a secure password is. And so we make it fun and entertaining. We have a junior cohort that Palo Alto Network supports at the university as well, and they're elementary school girls. Last year it was 3rd graders, this year it's 4th graders, next year it'll be 5th graders. Could you guess what year my daughter's in school? Right now, a 4th grader. So we have her and her friends going through a junior cohort on Mondays after school, and they started with soldering. So here's these little girls that are soldering. They're creating light bugs that when you solder the connections, the sensors covered at night, the light up. And then we went into Python programming, and they're making different diagrams on the computer as well in a very visual sense. So you have 9 and 10-year-olds that are learning to solder, learning Python. Next is Lego robots, and then we'll get into some crypto puzzles. So you can teach girls these very core concepts without having to pink it and shrink it. You just have to work with them to learn what it is that motivates them. And that's what we've been doing with CybHER. So early on in my academic journey, I noticed I was typically the only one that was a woman in the room. And then when I was a professor, I still was, just on the other side of the podium. A few years ago, the New York Times performed a nationwide survey to understand what a computer scientist looks like. And the results was a white guy in glasses. Now, I have nothing against a white guy in glasses. I married one. This foundation was founded by one, but I am not one. And so how do I help little girls be something that they can't see or understand what it is that put a name to a profession that they don't know exists? And so that's what we're doing. And so we're trying to change the perceptions of cybersecurity in our younger population. So this is my little daughter, Chloe, several years ago. And one of the things to keep in mind is that we always tell little girls a couple different things. One, oh, you're so cute, and you're so sweet. But girls can be cute and curious, and they can be sweet and smart. And so that's what we're doing to change the perceptions. Yes, tea parties are great. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique at Disney World, I'm all there for it. But so is balance. And so here's my daughter with the Secretary of the Air Force, with a commandant of the National Cryptologic School at the National Security Agency, a founder of an international organization for women in cybersecurity, a New York Times best-selling author, and a CEO of an intelligence firm. And so I make sure that she can see all sides of things, and I do that for my son as well. He needs to see that women are at the leading forefront of this as well. And so it's not just her, but it's a visual of what we're doing with CybHER, is that we're showing women who are excelling, who are leading, who are pioneers in the field of cybersecurity to a group of students who haven't heard what a red team operator is, or what is a digital forensic investigator. And so we're helping put a face to the career so that way they can see it and think, I can be that too. Now, one thing I heard over and over in my career is they're just not interested. You know, I would always be in a room where I was typically the only woman, and someone would say, rightfully so, where are the women? And one of the men would say, well, they're just not interested. Well, that's not true. We are interested, but we might not be interested in what's being created. If I go to a security conference and someone sniffs my password and throws it up on a wall, the wall of sheep, to make fun of me, that's off-putting to me. I don't want to be part of that. But I want to go to a conference where I'm learning the cutting edge areas of digital forensics, which is my field, and being able to apply that in my area of cybercrime investigation. And so I can do that without having to go into that masculine world where we make fun of people in order to learn. So it's just a little twist in the way that we develop. So one of the things I've learned early on is that if there's not a seat for you at the table, then just make your own table. And this is one of our first Gen Cyber Girls and CybHER security camps that we held at Dakota State University. When the National Security Agency started these programs in 2013, we had a co-ed camp at DSU. And I advocated to get a girls-only camp. And they asked me, well, if you only had 10% women at this camp, what makes you think that you could get a whole camp full of girls? And I confidently said, although inside I felt like a liar, I said, well, if we create something for them, they will be interested. And so they said, okay. So they gave me funding for a pilot. And so they said, how many girls can you get next year? And I said, 60. And they said, okay. So I put it out. I put the registration out, all the schools that we've been to, all the kids that we've impacted, put it out there and told myself I'm not going to look for 2 weeks, because I knew I would start refresh to see how many were trickling in or not trickling in, and it would be awful. Well, fast forward 2 weeks, I went to go look, and I thought, okay, if I have 40, I'll think that that's a win. I'll just hustle and get 20 more. I had 180. 180. So I quickly turned off registration. Completely panicked. I'm like, what am I going to do now? And so from there, I went out and I found sponsors. And I found companies that were as passionate about this as I was, and got additional funds to bring in additional girls into the camp. And so every year we have the largest girls-only camp that the National Security Agency sponsors in South Dakota. So across all of the country where there's 150 camps, South Dakota has the largest girls-only camp. It's because we're creating things for them. And not only do we let in 125 girls every year, we have about 200 on a waiting list. That's incredible. And we see girls that have a background like I did. I was captain of the basketball team, pitcher of softball, and president of computer club, because you can do all of that. And so we see that same representation in this population, which is great. So the girls spend a week on campus. They learn digital forensics, they learn cryptography, they learn Python coding, networking. They learn all sorts of fun hands-on activities. As I mentioned, if there's not a seat for you at the table, make your own table. And that table can look different depending on where you're at. And so here's an early CybHER club. So these are just Dakota State University students that we're supporting and providing scholarship for and professional development. You can always see my daughter. It's kind of like, where's Waldo? And here is last summer's camp at campus. We had just a powerhouse of a lineup. We had the General of U.S. Cyber Command, and that's who's right here, which is phenomenal. Senator Rounds, he's a chair of important committees in the U.S. Senate. We had our governor and others, and all of these girls learned this week, which was just phenomenal. One of my other tables that's really awesome is WIS. It's Women in Cybersecurity. Dr. Ambereen Siraj of Tennessee Tech, who's now at the National Science Foundation as a program officer, founded this. And this annual conference is critical for bringing together women and learning in community with them. You can also see my daughter right next to Ambereen in the front. I believe this one was at Carnegie Mellon. So it's a big social experiment. I'm like, what is she going to do? What is she going to be? She's exposed to all of this. So maybe it's art. She likes art. I don't know. But she's getting the vision of it. I wanted her, I did a keynote at this event a couple years ago, and I wanted her to see mom on stage in front of 1,500 women, and just to think that's normal. That's what women do. We communicate the science that we're learning and researching. So I wanted to share a couple of resources of our CybHER area, our website, our YouTube page. We have videos, we have a lot. It's all student created. All of our students are creating this content. And then what does this mean for the university? And so this part is really exciting. In 2013, we had less than 20 women studying in the Beacom College of Computer and Cyber Sciences. And this fall, we had over 200. That's a huge increase in that period of time. And so while we do not have, I'm talking to scientists, so you all get this, we do not have a long-term longitudinal study that's IRB approved to track minors. We don't have that, but anecdotally, we do know of students that we visited with in their middle school classroom who came to camp, who then came to our high school camp, who are now enrolled at the university, and we're hiring to go back into the classroom and mentor little girls. And so we have a lot of that. We can also look at statistics such as first name, last name, hometown, and show that about 28% of the students that come to camp enroll at DSU. And so that's exciting to see as well. So one area that we have that's intentionally curated to both boys and girls at the high school level is CX3, Cyber Community Club. And this club, it's monthly activities with training, professional development, competitions, mentoring. They're paired up, and then they work with a high school or with a collegiate student at DSU as well. And so I thought I'd throw that out there. It is nationwide. We just did a Capture the Flag competition with over 500 students. And as my time is winding down, I just have my bio here, but I look forward to talking with you and engaging with you before and during the panel.
Thank you so much. Usually, if I think about whether or not I want to go back in time, I'm like, oh God, absolutely not. You can pay me. But then I hear about incredible programs like this, and I'm like, oh man, I do elementary school again to experience that. That's very cool. Thank you. So next up, we've got Engaging Marginalized Genders in STEM Learning, a Feminist Framework. And I want to introduce our next two speakers. It's going to be Rebecca Ljungren. She's the Education Programs Manager, empowers learners of all ages to think critically about the past and to inspire a more just future, which we love. Her activities include developing and implementing in-person programs, overseeing digital learning initiatives, and managing the museum's internship and fellowship programs. We don't know when she sleeps. And she earned a BA in art history from American University and an MAT in museum education from George Washington University. And alongside, I'm gonna say Shannon Baldioli. She coordinates the National Air and Space Museum's teacher professional development efforts, including both local and national programs. She also spent nearly 4 years working for the museum's Explainers program at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center. She's a member of the museum's DEAI Council and the Discovering Our Universe exhibition team. She mentors, she guest lectures for George Washington University's museum education program, and she's written a lot about all this sort of stuff. I also wonder when you sleep. Really excited for this conversation. I mean, especially, I know I never thought about the sciences, really. I didn't see a lot of women who looked like me, and I think that's come up multiple times. So really excited to hear from you all. Okay, continue.
It is so wonderful to be in community with all of you today and learning about everybody's programs. I was telling Shannon right before this, it feels like a very safe and inclusive environment in this space today. So thank you all for making that happen. I'm Rebecca, this is Shannon. We've been working together for over 7 years, but particularly on this project for 7 years, thinking about how we create the STEM learning environment. So a lot of the programs today actually probably implement a lot of the strategies we're going to talk about. And some of them might feel familiar, or we might package them in a different way. But we focus primarily on not just the learners who receive the benefit of what we do, but the educators, the facilitators, the program staff themselves, and the work that they're going to do to create the learning environments that are meaningful and inclusive and center those marginalized genders. I love already that we had a conversation around what do we mean by women in STEM and what do we mean when we're talking about gender. And you'll notice our title, we're talking about engaging people of marginalized genders, particularly. When this project first started 7 years ago, it was called Engaging Girls in STEM, Women and Girls particularly, and we've expanded that view to create a more feminist framework in that we want to work beyond just cis women and girls' experiences to seek and facilitate experiences for all that are experiencing gender oppression and using the lens of gender to create those experiences. So that applies to everything that we're talking about today and the language that we're choosing. So often when we're in these spaces talking as educators, historians, program managers, we know that many of us have made great strides in making sure to include more stories of women and marginalized genders in STEM histories and STEM learning spaces. But we wanted to get to the core of what pedagogical techniques we could use and train each other to use to really center those who are experiencing gender oppression. And through that, we've developed a comprehensive examples-based facilitation strategy for STEM learning in both formal and informal learning environments. And our goal is to actually create, we're in the middle of this process, to create a free guide for facilitators in both formal classrooms as well as museums, parks, other informal learning environments so that they can develop their facilitation skills in an inclusive and equitable way. So we want to share out the kind of history of that project, some of our key findings, and where we're going to head from there. So I'll hand it over to Shannon.
We're going to do the technology thing. There we go.
Oh,
perfect.
I forgot about that.
We have slides. It's great. So just to give you a bit of background on the problem, as Becca said, we work together at the National Air and Space Museum, and that's where this work originated, but we're really excited that both of our institutions now are empowering us to continue working together on it. So this started as a multi-year internship program. It was funded by board member emerita Lynda Mills. She was the former VP of operations for Northrop Grumman. She's now retired. But Lynda Mills was incredibly interested in engaging girls in STEM. She would tell the story about the fact that she was really encouraged by her dad to take on a STEM career. She was always given opportunities. She came from a background of privilege, but even still felt really felt left out often, was often the only girl in her classes and her coursework. So what she was hoping to do was get STEM majors to come into the education department of our museum and do a little bit of research on how we can continue engaging and lifting up girls in STEM. So this was a 3-year internship project, and we created a cohort of interns, so 3 interns per summer. For the first summer, our interns did research, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. And then in the second year, our interns actually did some evaluation of our on-the-floor programming at the museum, just seeing what facilitators were doing and how some of that research might be able to impact the facilitation techniques, which is what led into this guide. And then in year 3, the interns actually worked with our digital production interns to create a training video for our explainers and our astronomy volunteers, who I'll also talk about in a few minutes. But the training video, we wanted something concrete. We wanted the interns to be working towards something that could help really immediately get our facilitators changing the way that they worked. And then Lynda Mills has continued to fund this work, but after that initial 3 years, her funding has gone to our camps that we've created for girls and marginalized genders. They're called She Can. We have camps in both the Washington, D.C. area and in Bentonville, Arkansas, for girls and marginalized genders to learn about careers in aviation. So just some of the initial findings, and I appreciate that some of you have already kind of given these. Kata was mentioning earlier that only about 27% of STEM workers are women. And that gender gap continues. Girls are taking fewer STEM courses as they advance through, degrees in STEM. And part of that we were finding actually is happening as early as, little teeny tiny preschoolers, little girls. And it's happening around the way that we help girls create a STEM identity or create their own identity, right? We all know I have 2 little girls now, and am very conscious of the way that we talk about the activities that they do and the things that they do. And in our house, there's nothing that's for girls and nothing that's for boys, but my 4-year-old is in preschool now, and so very often we hear things like, dresses are for girls or tutus are for girls, and boys like Lego. So my daughter Stella loves Lego, and she has a male classmate that's like, Lego are for boys. Like, the boys are going to play Lego and you can go play with, this, that, and the other. So we also learned this in our research, that STEM identity is so important to helping young girls, and especially in elementary and middle school, see themselves in STEM careers and see that they can potentially continue doing this work, and that they could, go on to be a STEM professional. And then another piece of the research we found, we're both museum professionals. We're not seeing students, girls every day. We have, sometimes our facilitators have a 2-minute interaction with a young girl, a young woman. And so a lot of our questions were about how we could actually further this field and what we could do there. But we found the Association of Science and Technology Centers released a report in 2021 about science centers and museums and those out-of-school experiences becoming great community hubs and places where girls who aren't getting this kind of support at home or in schools can come to continue getting that support for, to foster that love of STEM and STEM learning. And since this project began, obviously a lot more research has been done. We started this project in 2016, and lots more research has been done. PBS's CybHER, lots of different programs are focusing on this work as well. So what we found in our research and what our interns kind of distilled down as the beginning of this guide is the 4 core barriers in STEM, which Becca's going to talk a little bit about, and what we focus on for the rest of our guide.
Thank you. So our 4 barriers distilled for the guide in STEM learning environments. They're by far not comprehensive, and each learning environment is going to have its own unique challenges. So I think you can always riff off of these as an educator or facilitator. But with each of these, we identified kind of how the barriers show up in learning spaces, and then in the facilitation guide, we're developing out really basic, concrete, examples-based strategies on how to create a more inclusive learning environment to dismantle these barriers. Of course, stereotypes and biases and systemic oppression writ large is the most important barrier. I think it supersedes all the rest. It affects all the rest, the way that we are experiencing systemic oppression in our world, and how educators and facilitators think about their own positionality and can create learning environments that are truly inclusive and culturally conscious is the first step in creating a STEM learning environment that's going to center all learners, especially learners of marginalized genders. And so with that barrier in mind, the other three barriers we found have a really big effect in STEM learning. First, fixed mindset. And with our fixed mindset, we actually saw a little bit of it in the play last night. If you're here for the play about Amélie du Châtelet, the idea of genius often is equated, especially in science fields, but I studied art history. Genius is rife there as well, if anybody has studied that, art history in the room. And this idea of knowledge being innate and fixed and something you cannot learn or grow into contributes to a lot of disempowerment, especially for young kids, especially for young girls. And so to dismantle that barrier specifically, we always encourage a growth mindset pedagogy so that knowledge can be built through practice and hard work, being able to show how mistakes are made and how we grow from them, and give examples throughout history of the hard work that people have put in, including Amélie du Châtelet, who we saw in hard work and persistence in doing all the things that she did. I think that was a great example of growth mindset, as in balance with fixed mindset as well. The next barrier we have is in flexible education settings. Oftentimes, I'm actually in a very traditional position right now, the sage on the stage, where we often create a specific environment that has a lot of longevity in education systems, where you have one person speaking. It's designed for everyone, but often the biases within this type of instruction really prioritize boys and men as learners, and a lot of the pedagogical research that underpins it prioritizes them. So creating flexible education settings specifically, so being able to use more constructivist learning methods, having lots of project-based hands-on environments. I love learning about CybHER's activities, as well as using really simple tips such as wait time and developing inquiry-based strategies in STEM learning can go a long way to making a learning environment more flexible and actively helps learners who are marginalized gender identities. And then finally, the barrier we see up here that I think educators, historians, but also any community member contributes to is erasure. Whenever we're thinking about erasure, we are thinking about being complicit in the conscious or subconscious minimizing or erasing of marginalized stories from historical and contemporary narratives. How we share things on social media, what's included in our news, how we talk to our friends can contribute to erasure. And so in our learning environments, the idea of presenting role models, but also you yourself as a facilitator, thinking about how you present, can help combat that erasure in those settings, as well as validating your learners and making sure they see themselves as competent and empowered individuals, using very small tips such as repeating somebody's words back to them or following up with questions to show that who they are and what they're bringing to the table is worthwhile. These are all little tips and tricks that we've kind of brought together as part of this research to frame out how to combat these barriers in the facilitation guide. All right, so Shannon's going to talk a little bit about how we've trained folks using these methods.
So as we said, we were hoping initially, and excuse me, I didn't mention at the beginning, but that 4-year-old I was talking about gave me her preschool cold this week. Love it. Our initial goal was to get a training guide out for our on-site facilitators, and we focused on 2 separate audiences at Air and Space. One was our explainers program, who I was privileged enough to manage for several years. Becca was a part of our explainers program when she was in undergrad and grad school, right? And our explainers are student facilitators. They're generally teenagers or folks in their early 20s that are facilitating programs, our more hands-on STEM programs on the museum floor. And then also our astronomy educators were also part of the audience there. Sorry, I lost myself on the flip over of the page there. So what we wanted was to create some sort of training guide that was concrete, that was, just as Becca said, had strategies that could be implemented immediately to combat these barriers or to start working towards combating these barriers. So we had the interns think about and create a video. The videos become a regular part of our training regimen. Our explainers and astronomy volunteers still use it. I actually jotted down earlier that also our She Can counselors watch the video. So as part of our camps, we bring on interns in the summer who go through the camps with our girls. It's a pretty extensive camp. The girls actually get to go on a discovery flight. They go up in a plane and fly. So we've got lots of counselors that come in, and this video has become a great training material for them as well. So explainers are trained, and our astronomy volunteers are trained in basic and formal education techniques, right? We want them to be asking questions. We want to encourage that inquiry. But we were realizing through that second year, that evaluation, that just small things that explainers were doing were sort of going against some of these findings that we had, right? You spoke on it earlier, talking about that sort of, that feeling of competition that's often happening, tossing, pardon me, tossing those passwords up on the wall and making you feel, poorly, is something that we've it's become ingrained. And it's a way that I think, pardon me, it's a way that we know that that competition tends to foster, boys and young men. It really kind of riles them up and gets them excited. But the research we've found is that fostering a collaborative environment is the best way to engage girls and marginalized genders. Pardon me. Thank you so very much. So what we were doing with this training video and our training materials was helping our explainers just foster those sorts of environments, using a little bit of wait time, asking, folks to take a pause and think before their questions came out, instead of calling on the first person, right, that raised their hand. Not thinking about those fixed mindsets, encouraging wrong answers, and encouraging a little bit of thinking about a wrong answer. So very sorry. And also with our astronomy volunteers, one thing that we've been working to do is helping them to combat that erasure piece, right? Having them talk about female astronomers, or folks that we would now consider female astronomers that maybe in their day wouldn't have been given that due. Folks like the Harvard computers. Goodness sake, of course it's right now. So several years past the end of the program, we had a couple of interns that have continued doing this work. And an intern in 2019 that helped flesh out some of that research that I talked about earlier. And then in 2021, Jamie created a outline of the guide for informal and hopefully soon to be a guide for formal educators as well. So while I get myself together, Becca will finish talking about the future of our project and how we hope that you maybe will collaborate with us on it.
All right, I know we're at time, so just really fast, as an ongoing project, we wanted to honor all of our paid interns who have worked with us before. That's really important to us, but we are not done. We would love to collaborate with folks in this room and beyond to close any research gaps, as well as finish out the guide, which we want to be able to offer free of charge to any facilitators. We are also hoping to extend this project to work with formal educators in the classroom, both in the K through 12 and university setting, to develop a similar guide since there's unique challenges in those spaces. So we hope to learn more from all of you about the ways that you engage learners of marginalized genders in STEM, and invite you to all collaborate with us. You can find our information, of course, on this slide, and please come up to us after the presentation. But thank you all so much.
Thank you. I mean, this is really exciting too, I think, thinking about informal learning spaces and the idea that this is an entire ecosystem that we're all coming in, and so there's all these different places where we can make a difference. So that's really exciting. Next, we have STEM-Rich Museums Potential for Preparing Girls for Careers in STEM. And our next speaker is going to be Dr. Lynda Kennedy. She serves as the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum's Vice President of Education and Evaluation. She's got a career of nearly 30 years that includes positions integrating STEM, history, and the arts with the Lower East Side Tenement Museum, the Museum of the Moving Image, and the New York Public Library, their research collections, amongst many, many other places. She holds a BFA in theater from NYU's Tisch School of Arts, and an MS in museum education from Bank Street College, and a PhD in urban education from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And just really excited to hear you talk and share with us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm also a Philly girl, Northeast. Well, right, but I went to Creative Performing Arts High School down here when it was on Broad and Spruce, because that's how old I am. You're going to hear a lot of things echoed from what my colleagues have said this morning and just before this. And we are going to go through, if I can, the elements that make museums and cultural organizations effective for engaging and welcoming girls into STEM studies and careers. And again, I'm using very girl-centric language, and as you could tell from my earlier question, I'm trying to find a way to make that a little more inclusive in a non-clunky, non-too-academic way, but haven't gotten there yet. With strategies for supporting girls in the most typically excluded groups, and challenges and opportunities for tracking long-term outcomes of girl-serving STEM programs in museums. One of the things you'll hear me also say, informal learning environments, which has been said earlier. I wish I had another language for that, because we have, logic models and project outcomes and maybe more pressure than the formal settings. We have funders that want us to change the life trajectory for students after seeing them for 90 minutes. So we're very formal and thoughtful on how we think about outcomes. But again, as non-school settings, we'll go with informal right now. So many people said, what is Intrepid Museum? So I'm going to just briefly, this is us. We get over 1 million visitors a year, but it is amazing if you're outside of New York City, how many people don't know us or only know us as the Intrepid, the aircraft carrier, which actually is an amazing piece of innovative technology. It's a floating airport. Those things are very cool. And it was made for World War II in 1943. But we also have a variety of other things. We have the first space shuttle, the prototype Enterprise. We have a Concorde. We have 28 other aircraft, an A-12 spy plane, a Soyuz capsule, a really fun collection of innovations that are historically, they're driven by historical context. So again, I'm not so siloed, and that's maybe one of the pluses of informal environments is we don't have these rigid silos between disciplines. All right. So there's some of the stuff. Oh, and the submarine. We have a submarine that carried nuclear missiles. It was kind of an interim diesel sub. We have a lot of prototypey things. It was before nuclears and after diesels. We also have exhibits and collections that further the story to groups maybe not so easily represented in some of the typical histories. Female pilot of the Concorde, Defying Gravity was an exhibition on women in space. We've had Mae Jemison come and talk to our students, we try and really, again, tell the full story. The Greater Opportunities Advancing Leadership in Science Goals Program for Girls. It's 15 years old. It's completely free for students. It serves 50 girls every summer who are rising 9th and 10th graders. 6 weeks long, it was 5 weeks this year because of peer construction. We've always been conscious of lowering pay barriers. So again, it's always been free. We've provided transportation. We provide lunch because most of the girls we're trying to serve would have gotten free lunch in public school. We're now looking at paying students for their participation because you can work as young as 14 in New York City, and there's a big youth employment program through the city, so we don't want to lose girls to another paid opportunity. We want to keep them with us. We have an annual Girls in Science and Engineering Day. We have mentorship and college days. We do have paid internships for alumni of our Goals program. And we have an annual Unstoppable Woman event where it's a fundraiser. We invite these wonderful women from aerospace fields and then make sure that our girls also get invited to come along for free. I'm going to be talking about, and I'm excited to do this here, an NSF-funded project that we did with the Education Development Center and the National Girls Collaborative Project called the STEM Effect. And in it, it was a research agenda hoping to engage researchers, academics, and informal educators to do some longitudinal research into the effectiveness of their programs. We all can prove what happened like right after 6 weeks, but it's much harder for a variety of reasons I'll discuss for the informal staff to track it longer. So I'm hoping that you all will pick up on this. I'm not going to address the overarching problem. I love that idea of not even doing that because you've heard it and we all know it, especially in engineering. But for the action agenda, the problem really was understanding those mid and long-term impacts of out-of-school time STEM experiences for girls in museum settings. And museums in this case is a shorthand for things like science centers, museums like mine, and any kind of informal setting. Aquaria, zoos, cultural organizations could be another way you want to look at it, or ISIs, informal science institutions. We made sure to use design-based implementation research methods. One of the problems in education in general is that research doesn't make it into the place of the teaching. It is often written in language that practitioners don't use. It is often written in ways that don't take into consideration the pressures and the barriers in their settings. So we really wanted to make sure that we were incorporating the voices of practitioners, and the research agenda, the published research agenda, is written and had feedback from practitioners. It's written so that it would be useful for researchers and practitioners, because ideally we want people working together. Our data sources were what's listed there. We had convenings, we had advisory groups. National Girls Collaborative Project has not pods, but I also love that term, networks across the nation, so we had representatives from there. We had Twitter chats, which was a new thing for me, which was great, and they were hash-tracked for the coding through the discussions. 4 focus groups of the key stakeholders. We had girl identifying groups, we had their family members, and then we had the logic models collected from 12 longer touch STEM programs. So in the results, we had some persistent problems of practice that we identified. So the research areas of focus were really based off of that are suggested for further research. We developed a logic model, kind of a general one of things that were across the board proving effective. We developed a model of critical junctures of the girls' pathways to STEM careers and where maybe energies could be focused, where they tend to be lost. We proposed methodologies for collecting and analyzing the longitudinal data and guidelines for nurturing and maintaining relationships with program participants. One thing I want to do, again, I'll talk about some of the problems of practice, but I also want to, if you're familiar with Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot's work in education, look for some goodness. There's so much goodness. We're hearing about it from Aaron Space and Udvar Hazy and all the other things that are going on here in natural sciences. So lots of goodness. Museums, science centers, zoos, and all the rest are not school. This gives us a lot of freedom for working with girls and girl-identifying youth and gender. What's the phrase you're using? Because I love it. Marginalized genders. In school, there's so much rigidity that really keep them from developing a STEM identity. So in museums, and we can allow students to develop these identities. There's a social aspect. There are no grades or test pressures for the instructors or the kids. There's an element of free choice learning, so a lot of self-directed, student-centered, Dewey would be so happy, student-driven work. and it's playful, right? And creative. So in terms of, the STEAM of quilts and the arts representing data visualization, that's amazing, and that kind of stuff can happen more easily in the flexible atmosphere of a cultural institution. We can have programs with a clear mission and goals beyond test scores. We can intentionally, lay out goals like build confidence, build competence and character. We can inspire girls to be strong, confident, and bold. And those things can be assessed, right? So it's more than just the STEM content. Activities in the programs we examined are designed to reflect what girls would do, why they would do it, and with whom they would do it with. The primary short-term goals of STEM programs for girls offered by cultural institutions which we examined were to introduce girls to STEM topics, make girls aware that there are women in STEM, and foster a community in STEM. Medium-term and long-term outcomes focus primarily on increasing girls' engagement and interest in STEM topics and taking STEM classes, and attending STEM-focused high schools or college STEM programs, and behaviors, such as participating in other informal STEM programs, enrollment in STEM classes, and pursuing a STEM career. Those are harder to assess because the girls have moved out of the sphere of influence. So that's, again, why this research agenda. STEM-rich museums can provide authentic STEM experiences and shared inquiry-based hands-on activities. Engaging girls in authentic science experiences that incorporate practices and tools used by STEM professionals, such as asking scientific questions, designing and conducting research, building prototypes, testing hypotheses, communicating results, to positively impact their perception of STEM fields and their science identities is completely possible and more easily possible in these settings. In authentic science experiences, girls solve problems in a context that is relevant to them. These learning experiences help girls develop a sense of being someone who does science. It lets girls take ownership of their own learning and engage in meaningful STEM work, which helps them foster and maintain positive perceptions about STEM and develop a STEM identity. STEM-rich museums can incorporate elements of positive youth development. And again, we tend to have them a little longer than that 45-minute class the STEM teacher in school might get. We can build confidence, competence, connection, character, and caring. Build them through relationships with staff. Social relationships are crucial in girls' perceptions of STEM. Sustained adult-youth relationships that are supportive, communicate warmth, foster connectedness, and good communication increase girls' interest, motivation, and persistence in STEM. Because part of this, too, is we did a gigantic literature review. So a lot of this stuff, again, is documented. We can provide personal development opportunities. And we hear about next step, becoming an explainer, then becoming on staff. Internship opportunities, helping girls hone their skills, develop talents, and reach their full potential. They empower girls to take charge, assume leadership roles, and help them build competence, confidence, and self-awareness. We can establish a community of practice or social network. It's been mentioned here several times. Girls need a meaningful and supportive community. They need to perceive that STEM programs contributed to their social capital, the quality and quantity of relationships, the resources available through social interactions, networks, and skills. And a lot of the girls we're recruiting, they don't have, a family kind of network. My uncle's not going to get me an internship. My parents maybe never went to college. So this is giving them a cohort, can really sustain them as they move to college and maybe become the only girl in their program. They have other people to reach out to. You can develop those 21st century personal and workplace-related skills, those soft skills, critical thinking, problem solving, perseverance, creativity, teamwork, and communication. And we can make room for joy and fun in the learning experience. We can use drama. We can use other forms of arts. We can, again, we said it earlier, what is science if not creative? It's got to have creative thinking. There's just an example in my last minute of critical junctures. It's in, again, if anybody is interested, I hope you are, and I can send you the publication of places you really want to focus your energies, because this is where girls leave the pathway or leak out of the pipeline, whatever image you want to use. Again, so many challenges for the informal setting. We have limited capacity of staff. Our staff is often low paid, and they are, so there's turnover. The youth in an urban setting, they move a lot. So trying to keep track of them, especially when they're minors and it's a little creepy to be stalking them around social media, or they've changed their email, and all of these things. So, and also in terms of research, STEM practitioners are often really resistant to formal outcomes, and they have different understandings of what STEM identity might mean. They don't want you to be like, oh, I have to give all my kids a test now, because we don't do that. So working with researchers, again, can be a little bit challenging. I was going to go into mitigating challenges, things like we have, partnering with bigger organizations that have more capacity, but partnering with you all who are at universities would be a great way to do it. All right, and collaborating with families is a big one. Making sure the families are welcome. Their parents will stay in touch with you a little more easily. And then the priority areas are outlined in the research agenda. So again, I won't go into it, but I hope that you will, because I'm done now, right? I hope that you will ask me for it. I, of course, didn't put my own email up there, but it is very simple. It is L, like Lynda, Kennedy @intrepidmuseum.org. And email me and I will send you the PDF. Thank you.
We have some time for conversation, maybe about 10, 15 minutes, so I'll let Alexis kick us off.
Yeah, this is awesome. So first of all, thank y'all so much. Most of my work is around storytelling. I do the history of science, and I love so much that you all are helping us not just think about what are the stories we tell about science, but what are the stories we tell ourselves about science, and that's just, it's really exciting, and so I thank you. I am going to kick off with the first question while we sort of gather some other ones. I'm thinking about, I know this came up a couple different times, you're working with younger populations. I know for myself, my father had an 8th grade education. My mom eventually got her GED, and they were trying to navigate this world where I was like, I want to go to college, and I want to do all these things. And they were like, cool. And so I'm curious for you all, how do you sort of grapple with that in your programs, dealing with, because you're thinking about the entire family, you've got to get parents, somebody's signing those kids up, right? They can't sign themselves up. And so I'm just wondering if you can sort of talk about, because I'm sure that's a challenge that y'all all face.
Yep. For the longest time, when we're trying to engage and recruit youth, we've had 2 questions. Do you like math and do you like science? And we see those questions asked over and over. We've twisted that at DSU with CybHER. And one, we ask kids, are you curious? Do you like to know what's going on? Do you like technology? Do you like your phone, an iPad, a computer, everything, all the IoT devices? And third, do you want a high-paying job with upward mobility? That one usually does it. So that works with parents and that works with kids. But so many kids think, well, I didn't do great in math or this kind of math. Well, just because you didn't do great with algebra doesn't mean you might not excel in discrete math and vice versa. And so being able just to twist the conversation a little bit to curiosity, technology, and then your pocketbook, that's helped with us.
We've had to go out into different communities because, again, like any long-term program, the high-performing high schools start to hear about you and send all the kids. We have a high, immigrant population in New York City. A lot of the parents don't speak English. We have to think about that. Make sure we go to the community centers where they are, do presentations, have parent and family presentations as well as to the kids. Make sure the materials are available in the different home languages. So there's a lot of that, building the relationship and building trust and going where they are because they're not necessarily going to get informed about the program by a school counselor.
I want to second everything, especially going out and doing the intentional outreach, which takes time, which no one wants to fund, but it is so important and is critical for all of this. And also add that, especially in the environments we're educating and facilitating in, where we might only have a 2-minute interaction, one thing that is super critical for our facilitators is training them to differentiate in the moment for everyone who's involved in the conversation. So you're not just speaking to a child, but you're also speaking to their caregiver at the same time, and you're involving them in an intergenerational learning experience. Building that confidence together as learners will help them continue to do that kind of experience later on. They've practiced it once with you. Hopefully they'll be able to practice it again. If you get to see them again at some point, you can help them continue to practice that skill building together. So that's another way in these very quick moments by training our facilitators to concentrate on everybody as a unit instead of just one aspect of the learning situation.
Rebecca said something that resonated with me. One of the aspects of our program is we go out to the Native American reservations in South Dakota. We have 9. We have 9 Native American reservations in our state. And AT&T sponsors us to go to the Boys and Girls Club that's associated with the reservations, where we teach the kids core competencies, and then we teach caregivers online safety. And so the caregivers of these youth are learning, what apps do I need to look out for? How do I monitor their behavior and activities online? How do I weed out people that are bad, have bad motivations from interacting with the kids? And so absolutely meeting them where they're at, but finding organizations that sponsor and support that types of initiative as well.
I was just going to add that teachers and transportation are sort of our 2 big ones when it comes to finding folks. We always talk in DC is divided into wards, right? Ward 7 and 8 are always students that we're trying to get, not those high-performing high school kids from the Virginia suburbs. And getting to their teachers and talking with teachers, developing relationships with the teachers that are teaching their science classes, not necessarily counselors, not necessarily folks that are going to put it out to the parents that are already on the listservs. And then providing transportation is always really important to us, and to getting students from different parts of the city out. If we can, so our camps, we bring girls in to Virginia from DC and vice versa. Being able to provide some of those things that families may not be able to provide is also a really helpful way to get a more diverse student background.
Oh my gosh, thank you. First of all, I'll be stealing some of these. No, really. So I want to make sure also we have time to take questions from the audience. We have them.
Oh, there's one up here. I'm coming. I'm coming. Can you pass that down for me? Thank you so much.
Thank you to all the panelists. Amazing. Actually, I was hoping to ask you to follow up on what you just said about the work on Native American reservations, because the first panel I was completely blown away and so jealous of the critical mass of people and institutions you have here in Philadelphia. You know, the Intrepid Museum, New York has such fabulous resources. But I mean, I'm in an area where we're an hour away from even a medium-sized museum, 3 hours away from any major museums. I've talked to parents in rural Tennessee who just can't get their daughters any STEM access. So I was hoping you could talk more about what you were doing with the reservations.
Yeah, absolutely. Our CybHER student workers, so our current college women that are studying cybersecurity, whether it's computer science, artificial intelligence, cyber leadership, cyber defense, cyber operations, they're hired year-round to lead these outreach activities. So we have about 90 different hands-on lessons that we can share that have all been mapped to our South Dakota K-12 standards. But what we do is we partner. It is challenging to get into the reservation activities, but we've had a long-standing relationship with them. So partnering with the Boys and Girls Clubs has made it very easy for us, because there's a network, and that network understands the population, understands the challenges, and understands the different approaches that work as well. So it definitely, some of these visits are 4 hours away in very remote locations. And so we are sending teams of students to go to those sites, and they'll spend the night, they'll host their activity, they'll work with the caregivers, and then they'll come back. But we do ongoing activities with them as well. We don't want it to be one and done. And so every month we are going in through Zoom, and we left technology there, And so we left Spheros. Spheros are little programmable robots that you can learn Blockly and Scratch with. And so we worked with the CEO of Sphero. We got a lot of the robots, and we leave those at the sites, and then we check in with them every month on some different activities that we're working on with them.
That is awesome.
We have time for maybe one more question if somebody in the audience would like to ask. Oh, okay. I'm coming back to the front. You're making me walk.
Gotta move around.
I know,
Gotta
I
move
know.
around the space.
This is a question for Ashley. So where do you find so many girls that are coming? Because do they come from other states or what happens?
Yeah, great question. So our summer camp, we'll have girls from about 40 different states. So parents will bring them in, and I love, you guys had mentioned that it's the dads that bring a lot of their girls, and we see a lot of dads that bring girls. So when I go to events like this across the country, I always tell the audience that I hold back some seats. And so to people that I visit with, if you have anyone that you would like to send, you can get a hold of me. I have some cards and some CybHER stickers back there. And I hold back seats intentionally. So we do get a representation from events and visits like this. But I think through the questions and the approach that we take, where girls realize it's not a hacker in a hoodie, it's not the guy in mom's basement, it's not working alone on a computer, that it's a social, engaging environment, and you can't be successful unless you're working on a team. Just showcasing that, I think that's the key to success.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much. Honestly, another round of applause for our panel because they were excellent.